if Loop disappeared tomorrow, what would happen? And they're like, I would have to replace Loop with like 10 people. Because that's the reality, is that we are coming in and we are helping alleviate these pains. We are providing automated approvals. We're providing or automated exception approvals. And it means that people get to do what makes them the happiest.
Hey, I'm Oscar. This is Tech for Supply Chains, and this is your front row seat to the people, ideas, and technologies that are making the world move. So if you're enjoying this series, please like and subscribe, and thank you so much for being here. Welcome back to Tech for Supply Chains. Today, we're going inside the world of transportation spend management, and this is the hidden engine behind every load that moves. And it's often a major headache for shippers and for a lot of other parties in the industry as well. Today, we're joined by Robyn Wiener. She's head of marketing at Loop. And Loop helps companies finally make sense of and get the most out of their transportation spend data. So, Robyn, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Oscar.
All right, let's get started with the company story and the mission. So, let's start at the very beginning. Tell us what's Loop and why is transportation spend management such a challenge for shippers and for others in the industry?
For sure. So Loop got started from our founders, Matt and Shu at Uber Freight. And in their time there, they realized there was so much valuable data trapped on paper and trapped. One of my favorite quotes I've heard is the supply chain runs on Excel documents saved locally. It's so true. And documents trapped in our emails. And they identified the fact that it's a process problem, it's a data problem, it's a finance problem. And upon this sort of aha moment was the emergence of LLMs as we know them today. And they realized that with the ability that LLMs have to contextualize information and be trained, we could help improve on these three pillars, on the process, on the data, and on the financial risk and liability mitigation. And so that was the emergence of why we came to be. And now we're servicing enterprise organizations around the world across all modes. That's our biggest mission, honestly, is that not only is this data trapped, but every mode is nuanced and different and has different formats. And so we are bringing it all together in one platform.
That's super exciting. And
Yeah.
it's so funny that you mentioned that because a lot of companies that we go into and visit and spend some time with really run on Excel. It's
Yeah.
super.
It's a little scary when you realize how much money and trust sits on a locally saved Excel document. And that's just like, how can you understand your total cost to serve, right? And there's so much that's just trapped in that information. So that's really our mission beyond freight audit and pay, is just unlocking spend data throughout the supply chain and giving access to the teams that need it so that people can be more forward looking.
That is an exciting mission. And
Yeah.
why don't you tell us a bit more about the early days of Loop? What
Yeah.
was some of the founding insight around those early days at Uber Freight?
Um, from the early days, really the founding insight was how much information was trapped on data. One of our first customers was Great Dane, actually, and we have the case study published on the website. But they were just trapped in pure paper processing. Clemens is a similar story, which is a case study we have on our website. And so when they were identifying these issues at Uber Freight on the paper, they started building these LLMs. And so we brought these initial customers in. We were literally consuming this paper documents and training the LLMs on it. And so it was really just like a wild story that the team has of just this processing training of paper documents into this digital world. And what's wild is in these stories over time that we heard at the beginning of the company, one of my favorite ones is one of our customers would literally print out an invoice that they received and hold it up to their computer screen to compare it against the contracted rates. Like, that is the world that they were seeing at Uber Freight, was how not just inefficient the process was, generally speaking, from where information was traveling, but also on the human side, we were creating inefficiencies because they didn't know a better way to do it. So they're literally printing out digital paper on a paper to look at it, comparing it against their screen. And so I think those are some of the sweet stories I've heard from our team in those early days is really just transitioning organizations from such a heavy paper-based process to being fully digitized. And it's such a it's such a jump in terms of just light years ahead of where they were. And now they're able to focus their time on much more impactful, think forward looking insights, right? And accessing, it's not just like the process itself that was problematic. The biggest issues were let's improve the process, but the data at its core, that's really what moves the needle in terms of improving margin. And so again, that it's not just getting people out of paper-based processes and what they saw, but it was also about getting access to that data to have more insights on a real data-driven network optimization. Yeah.
That's great. We'll get into those insights in a bit. And it's also just refreshing to hear that we can solve some of these problems that have existed for so long with these
So
new technologies
yeah.
without relying on very old technology. I remember some of my very early experiences before LLMs took off was trying to reconcile some of that using OCR and using this very
Hmm.
old like legacy tools that
Yeah.
we can now do it in a much better way. So we'll
Yeah.
get to know some of your technology in a bit.
Yeah. It's
And
super cool.
that moves me, yeah, to the next thing that I wanted to really understand about you guys. So Loop brings together data from all over the supply chain, right? So how do
Yeah.
you help companies organize, unlock, and use all of that transportation data from the different
Yeah.
sources?
Well, we absorb the data in one of the classic ways, EDI feeds, but that's just the beginning. One of the biggest innovations that we have at Loop is creating our own proprietary AI models on the data extraction, contextualization, and linking. Let me put it more in layman's terms. When a shipment comes in, especially when we're talking about any non-parcel or EDI based mode, or EDI heavy mode, when a shipment comes in, there's multiple things that are coming into play, right? You've got BOLs, you've got PODs, you've got your invoices. All of this information is coming together. And without something like Loop, it's someone's job to string these data points together and say, do I have all of the information that I need to approve this invoice and also rate it against my contracted rates and actually approve it for payment, right? And so just that stringing of information alone, we solve in Loop with AI. So we're bringing these documents together. We're automatically contextualizing what kind of document it is, and then we're linking it to the related other documents within that shipment so that somebody's job isn't about trying to find it. Their job is just to approve that payment does need to happen because all of the information is there. This also frees up on the exception side. One of the biggest things that come up with our customers is, I mean, for lack of a better term, exception management hell is a place that time goes to die. Um, and we in the back end with our AI have built out policy rules that are based on your business, not our business. It's not about what we think should happen. It's about the rules that you think should happen in your business. Meaning, what variance threshold are you willing to be comfortable with per shipment? Are you willing to be, maybe ignore spend if there's a spend variance of like 5% on every shipment? That's fine because that's really insignificant to the margin. We can set those rules in the back end. We can also set rules on what parts of documents need to be in a shipment for it to be approved. So a lot of these human-based processes we're automating with AI, which is so cool. So our proprietary model at its core, there's multiple layers. We've got the data extraction. So we're pulling the information off of it, off of the actual image document or any unstructured data, whether that be an email, any of the other things I've listed, or EDI. We're pulling it out, we're linking it together, but we're also creating, in essence, a digital twin of the spend network. What do I mean by that? What we're doing is identifying any carrier idiosyncrasies. So maybe there's a carrier that always writes the invoice, hand writes it in upper right hand corner. Guess what? We note that and we'll always remember that. We have a customer who, and actually, this is pretty common across, especially larger enterprises, where you have a very large distribution center split into virtual warehouses. We contextualize that and understand that. So once our data or once our AI learns that nuance of your network, you don't have to go back and fix it every time. So what does that unlock? Automated GL coding. That's huge. GL coding is where the bane of so many people's existence. So cost allocation and GL coding is where we sing. Because we are able to contextualize using your rules, using your network, understanding the nuance of all of it. We can then do cost allocation. And so now finance can say, what's my total landed cost? And truly trust that data and not worry about delays in terms of that allocation happening, but also trusting the fact that there aren't humans making mistakes in there. Yeah, so we've got AI in multiple levers. It's quite an amazing thing to see, and I get to watch our engines. Like sometimes I'll just sit with our AI team and watch it automatically just sifting through information. You just see check mark, check mark, check mark. It's so cool.
That's exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, it
And
is.
I can imagine finance teams also spending fewer time just reviewing those exceptions, the
Yeah,
transportation and the operations team spending less time doing manual and grunt work that really,
yeah,
that's a lot of time spent that doesn't really add a lot of value that could be
no,
better spent building those relationships with the transportation providers
exactly right.
or actually using that data to analyze the, as you mentioned, the landed cost, or how can we improve the cost for this particular lane, right?
Exactly right. Yeah. And I don't think anybody wakes up in the morning and says, man, I'm really looking forward to my exceptions. Right. Like, let's be real. Our vision with Loop is let's get everybody out of exception management help. We'll take care of that for you. We'll set up your rules. And for the first few months, we're going to be training our entire AI system on your network. And over time, you get to touch it less and less and less. And you get to focus on the stuff that matters. Because at the end of the day, what are we all optimizing for? But fantastic customer service, right? And however that customer service is measured, whether that's getting your packages to your customer as fast as possible or as cheaply as possible so you can reduce the cost of that price to your customers. And that's really where we shine as well, is understanding what moves your business forward. We really fixate on our customers and bringing insights to them that are meaningful to their business, not just focusing on vanity metrics.
Amazing. Why don't you
Yeah.
tell us a bit more about the AI? And I think a lot of people in the audience are using ChatGPT and they're using
Yeah.
Claude and other consumer focused products,
Yeah.
and that gives you a good idea of the power of LLMs when you
Yeah.
use them. Why did you guys consider that you needed to train your own LLM models to get
Yeah.
to that level of reliability and enterprise grade results?
So this is where I geek out hardcore on AI, because I have been in AI for a few years now, and I've seen real AI, and I've seen a lot of duct tape AI onto very old software. So at Loop, the reason we're using our AI in the way that we're using it is that when it comes to data consumption, like let's be very blunt here and semantically correct. AI, as we talk about it right now, is actually generative AI. And generative AI is built on what are called large language models. They're not large data models. And I think that's something that people don't realize. You know, we see all this hype and we get really excited. Oh my God, AI can do anything. No, it can't. It fundamentally is built on language consumption and the probability of one sentiment to follow the next sentiment. So if you try and apply a large language model, a ChatGPT, whatever, one of your choice. If you try and apply it to a data set, you're going to have a really bad time. You want to see hallucinations happen? Do that. Especially if you haven't, let me caveat it, if you haven't trained that AI first on how to consume that data. And so instead of us trying to apply a chat based model to the data output, we're starting at the data input. And that is a brilliant move. Being that I've been in the data space for over nearly a decade now, what I keep seeing time and time again is so many people try and focus on the shiny bits of data consumption, the BI tools, but where time goes to die is the beginning parts of it, is the data cleaning, is the data contextualization and building that. That's why so much of us spend time in Excel. It's because no one wants to solve that part of the problem. It's the ugly part of the problem. We don't want to be on the shiny end with the graphs because that's what boards care about. And that's what moved the needle. So at Loop, we have begun by starting on the data extraction using LLMs to help them contextualize all of these networks so that when we throw an LLM or generative AI on the other end of the problem and ask questions of the data, we have formatted it in a way that an LLM can consume it with no hallucination. And I think that, yes, that is a very techie deep dive for a hot second, but that is something that people need to understand when it comes to AI solutions is that it is not just like a magic wand that gets waved and will solve all of your data problems. If done poorly, you will run into a very big problem of bad output, bad input equals bad output on AI. I mean, that is just a fact. And so it's so important to understand when applying AI, what part of the data lifecycle are you applying it, so that over time you can have the truest models. That's why with Loop we're really starting at the start with LLMs, because that will power so much more down the line.
I think that's a very good point, and I've seen these fail in multiple
Yeah,
times when you want to start with the very shiny end result, but don't really focus on where everything originates.
yeah,
You are setting up yourself up for failure by
yeah,
not solving the real problem at the very beginning, right? So I think that's
yeah.
a very good golden nugget from this conversation with you, Robyn, making sure that for anyone that's thinking about how do I apply AI to solve a data problem, let's make sure that you focus it on that initial piece, which is let's get the data right.
Yeah. And I think another piece too is that, back to it not being a magic wand, when people go into any sort of digital transformation, that's so old to say now, but like any one of those initiatives, AI will also not inherently solve inefficient processes. So it's really important to do some level of process mining in terms of what you're solving for generally, to find the most efficient route before applying any sort of model on top of it, because AI is not going to fix inefficiency, but smartly applied AI to more efficient processes, you will. And so that's, again, don't treat it like a magic wand. Really be cognizant. Let me go back to that example where somebody printed out the invoice, right? We could create an AI that prints the invoice, then self takes a picture of it, re-uploads it, and looks at the computer, right? That is us replicating that exact process into AI. But that inherently is highly inefficient and actually is quite consumptive in terms of compute power. And it's just like that's unneeded. So it is important for us humans to look at these processes and ask ourselves, do we really need the following things when we're doing exceptions? Have we just created inefficient processes for the sake of no one step back to ask why? And I think that's the other thing that we do at Loop, is help bring this information to the forefront in these processes so that people can actually ask, like, man, should we really be doing all of that? Or maybe we could just kick that one step out and save 20% of time. And that's AI or not. It's really important to be able to just have the data just take a step back and be like, why are we doing this? How can we be more efficient?
I would love to double click on that comment now. We've talked about the
Yeah.
underlying technology and how AI works in the different layers of the stack. So from the moment that you receive an invoice or the rate confirmation and help you go through that matching process,
Yeah.
after that all gets processed and the resulting data exists, how do teams leverage that data that got produced, and what results have you seen from the companies that you've worked with?
So we have not only do we have the best in class AI team, like I love the AI team, obviously. I annoy them all the time. They're okay with it. We have a best in class data science and analytics team. So how does that manifest itself? In our platform, we let people, either we have dashboards that people can interact with and see different information, just like you were talking about lane analysis, understanding how can I be smarter with where my spend is going and where I'm choosing to put loads. We also allow for people to query their own data or pull their own data sets if they want to consume it outside of the platform. You can pull data out and feed it into your own BI platform of choice. But on top of that, we also have this data science and analytics team that'll run scenario planning for you. And so that has resulted in millions of dollars saved for our customers in terms of helping. Not only are we saving costs just from identifying incorrect errors, duplicate billings, et cetera. We also are saving money by guiding them in terms of just providing some interesting insight into different contracts. So we just help in terms of identifying opportunity and laying where they're being inefficient and where their contracts are currently sitting. And so that has saved our teams, our customers, millions upon millions of dollars in terms of their optimization of their network. And over time, it's also carrier improvement, right? It's not. What's interesting is with Loop, it's this dual positive feedback loop, because number one, we're bringing in better data, but it's also requiring better carrier performance and how the carriers are sending their data in. We're able to go back and be like, hey, can you actually resend your BOLs? and all of this information, but break it down to a line item level. And so it's setting up best in class on both sides, that people are able to get the most out of their carriers, but also they can pay their carriers on time. And so then carriers are thrilled. And we even offer quick pay so they can get paid early. And so it's a positive feedback loop on the carrier performance. It's a positive feedback loop in terms of margin improvement. And yeah, it's a good time all around, to be honest.
That's great to hear. And what excites me about this technology is that people can actually work on things that move the needle, right? Instead
That's
of
exactly right.
being bogged
Yeah.
down by a lot of errors and having to be, as you said, exception hell. How do we focus people that have a lot of experience in the industry, that really have those relationships with carriers, to do their best work? And that's what
Yeah.
really excites me about this technology. So
Yeah.
I want to double click on some of those outcomes that customers see. So I've seen some of the claims around very high percentage of invoices being audited and paid with no touch,
Yep.
and millions of dollars saved. So
Yep.
how does the world look like for a company that starts implementing this type of technology?
It's a fabulous question. I actually recently spent some time with a lot of our customers, and the answer is this: I asked them directly, what's the value of Loop to you? And they're like, oh my gosh, the time that my team has been spending on this, on the exception management, they're now spending on forward-looking insights, truly. And one of the questions I like to ask is, if Loop disappeared tomorrow, what would happen? And they're like, I would have to replace Loop with like 10 people. Because that's the reality, is that we are coming in and we are helping alleviate these pains. We are providing automated approvals. We're providing or automated exception approvals. And it means that people get to do what makes them the happiest. And what I found, and why I like love supply chain so much, is that so many people in supply chain are just trying to solve the Rubik's Cube. And it's really hard to solve the Rubik's Cube if all you're doing is setting up your Rubik's Cube and putting the colors on the side, right? That's not the fun part. It's the solving. And so many of us are puzzle solvers. And so that's where people are focusing their time, is how do I improve my carrier relationships? How do I improve my customer success, improve relations with finance, so that finance sees us as a strategic partner and we all understand what our impact is to the business more meaningfully. So yeah, it is. Every customer I've asked so far is, if Loop disappears tomorrow, what would happen? They're just like, the amount of people I would have to hire. Oh my gosh. But at the same time, the people that were doing those jobs are just now focusing on things that bring a lot more joy to them and meaningful impact to the business.
Amazing. And
Yeah.
I that's the future that I want to see
Yeah.
across the board. I think that's very exciting, and leveraging technology to augment people's
Hmm.
capacity and
Yeah.
making sure that they're doing their best work. I think that's super
Yeah. I
exciting
mean, I
as a
think
mission.
one of the most interesting things when people worry about, and I experience this in marketing, let me be clear, like the sort of the fear of AI exists for all of us, right? It's going to take over our jobs. But the world that we live in is so utterly dynamic that just because this week or in the next month or whatever, we can have a very optimal decision made for one of our customers. They're like, great, this route, it's ideal, we figured it out. It's not going to be the same the following week or the week after that, right? It's a constant, we're constantly tweaking all of the different levers in it. And at its core, what I also have learned in being in supply chain is so much of it is built on relationships, and that will never be taken over by AI. And those relationships matter a lot. And so I think that's, if I wax philosophically about like the future of it all, I do see AI being augmenting the things that we don't enjoy, but allowing us to focus our times on the things that drive the business and also drive us joy. And I mean that because I see it over and over with our customers. There's never a lack of opportunity for optimization. It will never run out, because guess what? Some major storm may come through and throw everything up. I mean, we've got tariffs happening right now, and every day is a question. And that requires human insight and intelligence.
Yes, and it's so dynamic, right? Things change all the time, and I would like to double click on that and just understand, you're based in the Bay Area and you're seeing all of this innovation taking place and
Yeah.
changing so rapidly. What's the
Yeah.
most exciting piece of technology that you're seeing that will affect supply chains in the following years?
I mean, I honestly, I think we're in it. I think it's how do we most effectively utilize AI across our organizations to be more to just be more optimization focused. And as my data lens, it has me biased towards thinking that more and more solutions should be emerging that are focusing on these places that data gets stuck. And so I'm really excited by these solutions that are helping in the process mining side of things, in the areas where there are so much inefficiency because we haven't had the technology to pull ourselves back and actually look at it. That's what excites me. Are it's not the fun, it doesn't sound fun, but that's actually what unlocks the fun. It's Matt, our CEO, loves to say we're doing this on hard mode, and that's the reality. This is the hard stuff, the extraction of this transportation spend, and other AI companies that are really focusing on these very hard parts of where data is trapped, and unlocking that will unlock this entire layer of digital data access to a level of granularity we have never seen before. Um, and then all the BI stuff, that's the easy part. Once you have clean data, everything gets really easy and fun and shiny. But that's what really excites me are companies that are focusing on the ugly bits and unlocking those insights, unlocking those inefficiencies, and unlocking that data. And obviously, I see Loop as being at the forefront of that, especially in transportation spend, because it is such an ugly, uncomfortable, inefficient area of the business. But there's so much spend in there. There's so much liability in that, that once that gets unlocked, we can focus on other aspects of optimization. So, yeah.
Are you seeing any processes that were not possible before, or some tasks that
Oh,
were not possible before that are
yeah,
now available for us
absolutely.
with AI?
Yeah, let me be clear though. I like to operate in um, the impossibility of what we're doing could happen over an infinite amount of time with an infinite number of people, right? So if we want to look at a major enterprise and set up a digital twin of their enterprise and understand all of the nuance of their different buildings and virtual warehouses, this, that, and the other thing, you can throw people at that problem and eventually solve it with rule-based processes. But the sheer cost of building those rule-based processes is so utterly high that it's cost prohibitive. And so it's actually, before something like Loop, it's more cost. It's a better cost to just run it slightly inefficient, because the cost of writing out every single rule is just not
So high.
feasible,
Yeah.
as well as hiring offshore. Even if you're hiring offshore people to do the raw data extraction, you also run into cost prohibitiveness. I don't even know if that's a word, but the point is that AI, what AI does is shorten the time horizon. It's none of what we're doing is impossible with AI. It's the fact that we can do it in such a tiny amount of time. And that to me is the value of AI, is that it's quickening what we're able to do. And so that's what we're bringing to the table with Loop, is that we can now do all of this stuff at a cost that originally would have been astronomical or almost impossible to justify. Um, and that's what's so awesome. But yeah, I mean, I don't think it's solving the impossible, but it is solving the impossible in a time horizon of this big.
And making it economically feasible, right? It
Exactly.
now makes
Yeah.
sense to solve for that problem.
Exactly
Great.
right.
And I would love to understand, all of this seems like a very big improvement to processes and to overall results. Why don't you help me understand how companies are able to start piloting some of this, or start
Yeah.
to prove that, hey, this is actually worth doing? How can I
Yeah.
get to this point where I convince my CFO or convince the CEO that this is an investment worth making?
Yeah. It's funny that you bring that up, because we're in going through POVs with our prospects and current customers. Some stories we've heard of others in the space is that it can take up to a year to do a POV. A year. We're like, what? That's crazy. And the reason I bring that up is, again, that time horizon is so key. But yes, we run POVs for our customers, so that they can see the data, how quickly we get access to the data. Because the reality is, there is so much snake oil out there, and I just want to acknowledge that. I've heard the usage of the word scars. We're scarred on so many customer and prospect calls and meetings that I've been in, that people are very cautious to invest in something like this, because it sounds it just sounds so many light years ahead of the realities that they know. And so that's where we come in and say, please give us your data and we'll show you. And we can run a POV overnight for some. And we have done that recently. We literally were helping a prospect and within 24 hours turned around, not just like, here's your data, but here's some insights and how to action on this immediately. And so that's across modes. We'll run those for people so that they can understand how we're digesting it, contextualize it, but then they can see it in the platform. They can see the data and see how we're linking all of these shipments. I think it's just so many light years ahead of what other people have seen, especially if they have no surface right now. It's like going from a cart and buggy to a Lamborghini. So,
Amazing. Yeah. Good
yeah, it
analogy.
is important to us.
I think you brought an amazing point up around there's a lot of snake oil around, and
Yep.
sometimes the AI layer is just duct taped around a solution that was not built to support
So
that, right?
much. Yeah, it's bad.
So I would, for the audience that's listening to this, what would you recommend, like 2, 3 different points on if they're
Mm,
just out there in the market, maybe not necessarily for transportation spend, but across the board, they're evaluating new tools and
yeah.
new companies. How can they differentiate something that's real from
Yeah.
something that just has the AI sprinkles on it, but doesn't really solve the problem?
I would I think it comes down to the problem you're trying to solve with AI. If it's an LLM that's there to help do customer sentiment analysis to onboard a customer success team faster, to me that's a pretty simple use case of applying large language models with limited hallucination. But if you're trying to use AI to run an analysis of like asking it data-based questions, immediately my thought goes to a question I would ask a vendor is, how are you ensuring that the data is in a way that this AI will not have hallucinations? How are you mitigating against hallucinations in this data? And what are your data sources? It's really about diving into how the data is coming together and how they're making it accessible in a way that the LLM will understand it semantically and numerically. Because again, with LLMs, they see numbers as letters. It's very weird. It's like it's worth doing research, honestly, you guys, in terms of understanding how LLMs contextualize different bits of information. And so anytime I'm coming across an AI company and I'm talking to them, I'm like, great, let's dive into the data. Where are you getting your data from? How are you preventing hallucinations? And also, what does implementation actually look like? Like, let's really bake that out, because it's very easy to put a fake demo together to make it seem amazing. But I want to understand, what does this mean to me in my business and change management to make this actually effective? And by what time do I expect time to value? Truly, give me a time horizon, because AI at its core should be speeding up processes. And so it shouldn't take me 2 years to get to that innovation unless that innovation is worth that 2 year long investment and you can show me your plan on all of that data access. So yeah, that's usually where I start digging into is the access points.
Yeah, I think, and that's very actionable as well. When you're talking to a provider, let's dig deep into the data. How do you prevent
Yeah.
hallucinations? How are you training your models, right? How does that
Hmm.
reinforcement learning
Yep.
and where's that data coming from? How are you improving it continuously? I think
Yeah.
that's great.
Well,
Um,
one other piece I want to highlight on too is in AI, there's also this governance piece of it. And what parameters are you placing within the models that you're training to make sure that the data that you're providing? I mean, like, was it Microsoft who did the release, and then they're just suddenly like, there's everybody can access everybody's emails, and it's a nightmare, right? And so I think that's the other piece, is that people that move too fast and don't take a moment to pause, you end up providing access to these models that can give it out to anybody. So what are your parameters on mitigating risk when it comes to AI?
yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's a very good piece of advice and very
Yeah.
important to keep in mind. All right, now I want to change gears a bit and move towards the future and
Yeah.
understanding what's coming. So, Robyn, you get to talk to a lot of leaders. So,
Yeah.
if you could give them one big takeaway for getting more value from their network data, what would
Yeah.
it be?
Um, I think the biggest piece of advice that I have is identify solutions that alleviate your team on focusing on inefficient processes. in my mind, the future of any of transportation spend management, we automate all of this exception stuff with AI, and we're able to just manage. Folks are now focusing their time on the future of the business and how can they be more performant with the dollars that they have. And so I any solution that I see or on the market, it really is what are you doing to improve efficiency, but also improve access to the data, right? It's the more data, it's not just the more data, but the more clean data we have, the better decisions that we could be making. So those are the innovations that I see are the ones that are going to move the needle the most are the ones that are focusing on the ugly bits of the business that people don't want to be spending time on anyways, so that we as humans can be focusing on bringing our experience and innovation to life with data that backs up that decision making.
Yeah, I really like that. So bringing the technology to focus on those hard bits that are
Yeah,
not sexy, nobody wants to
yeah,
solve, and that technology is actually better positioned to solve for that problem than humans are,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
Cool. So I think a few closing thoughts. So the pace of change is really so fast, right? We've seen, I
yeah,
think it's 2 years that GPT 4.0 launched. It's been a wild ride since that.
yeah.
And the pace of change will just keep getting faster and faster, right? So
Yeah.
what can shippers do right now to future proof their supply chain data management as the world keeps shifting?
I think again, it comes back to investing in anything that allows you as real-time access to your data as possible, because the best way to be dynamic is having real-time data at hand. And it's a problem that people have been trying to solve as long as we've had data around, whether it's before the computers, right? I love to think about, like, people had a similar comment when Excel first emerged. What are all these analysts going to be doing now that we have Excel? We don't have to be going through like all of these files and stuff. And what ended up happening is that people just started becoming more efficient and more focused on future oriented decision making rather than spending their time on that back office process. And so it's just so important to invest in any technology that can automate the inefficient parts of business and give you that data access. I mean, there are so many amazing tools out there. I will also caveat and say there are so many amazing platforms out there that are able to run these demand forecasting, planning, all of the things that people want to focus on, but they can only be as accurate at the data as the data at hand, and they can only be as real time as you're able to pull that data off. And so that's why it's important to focus there, to me, first, before trying to go whole hog on this side of the business, because this is only as good as the data you're feeding it.
Focus on the source. I like it.
Focus on the source, man.
Amazing. Robyn, last question for you. So, what is a contrarian view that you have about AI and logistics? Maybe something that
Hmm.
you believe that most of the industry you think gets wrong or that are seeing in a way just different than you.
I I think it just comes back to a lack of understanding the fundamentals of generative AI and what it is at its core. I think it's worth everybody go ask your chat of choice and ask it to explain you how it sees the word apples. And I think the more that we can understand how these work, how these LLMs work, the better we can understand both the pitfalls, but also the power that they have. But yeah, it's a really great internet. I think like a meme or something I came across, but somebody asked ChatGPT how many P's does the word apples have, and it said one. Why? um, because it sees the double P as an alphanumeric code in the back end. It thinks in chunks. And because it thinks in chunks, it doesn't see the word apples. It sees an alphanumeric code combined together, and it's counting the number of P's in the alphanumeric code. And that is, to me, it's so eye-opening when you really understand how LLMs work. And it allows you to see the BS in a lot of different things on the market when they're trying to focus on the shiny bits and they're not focusing on the fundamentals, because you're going to have such risk and hallucination. So I think it's not even a contrarian view. It's just more of we all need to continue to immerse ourselves in understanding the power of this tool, but the limitations of it as it is today.
I love that. And I
Yeah.
love that it's super actionable and grounded, right?
Yeah.
So
I
I
mean, I
love
just
that.
love AI. I just like, I geek out on it all the time because it's utterly fascinating.
It is. It is. It feels like we're living in the future. And I love that
Yeah.
phrase that the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. And
Yeah.
we are already seeing that some of the early adopters of these technologies are already getting a lot of value just having the courage. And I think it
Yeah.
takes visionary leaders to see what are those opportunities and then going out to the market, finding out what's the best tool out there, and then coming up with a proof of concept or proof of value to really understand how that works inside
Yeah.
their organizations. And from
Yeah.
there, scale it up to the rest of the org. And I think
Exactly.
that's what's coming in the following years. So I'm glad
Yeah.
that we were able to chat. So, Robyn, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thanks for helping us understand where supply chain data, automation, and AI are taking us next.
Yeah.
And before we go, do you want to add anything else?
I think anybody looking to check out Loop, of course, please go to our website. It is www.loop.com. And we have a contact us page. Anybody wanting to see a demo, anybody wanting to experience a POV with us, please reach out. Our team is excited by chatting with you all. And yeah, just I'm looking forward to the time that Loop is immersed in everyone's network and we're all optimizing for the future.
Amazing. We'll
Yeah.
link all of that in the notes. And to our listeners, remember your data shouldn't just sit there, it should drive value.
Yeah.
And we've heard not only on this episode, but in the other ones, how your data across pricing, across spend management can actually help you save costs, improve margins, and move your business forward. So thanks for tuning in and thanks for joining Tech for Supply Chain. Bye.